What's up, Sales RXers, and welcome to this week's episode of the Sales RX podcast. I'm super excited because we're making a little bit of a pivot. As you know, I wanted to bring in more marketing folks to talk a little bit about the marketing side of what then leads into sales. And so I thought, hey, who's one of the best marketers I know? Let's bring in Andy Binkley, the CEO and co-founder of Tourial, a company that is designed to deliver a better demo experience at the top of the funnel to prospects by showing the tool with ungated content, to talk about just that, gating content and better ways to put content in front of potential buyers. And you know me, I'm a huge content creator, and I love it because I don't want someone who just downloads a case study to go have one of my SDRs and call them. I want to be able to have people creating content so that not only does our buyer kind of understand a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and the problem that we really solve for and what the benefit is of working with us, but I want them educated around that problem and why it is a big deal. You know, it's a big part that we deal with in our industry of sales. People find pain points all the time, but they don't find problems near enough. And so think about it this way. Would you pay $10,000 for a Tylenol tablet to solve a headache? You probably wouldn't, but you would pay $10,000 to get a brain tumor removed that could be fatal. And so the headache is the pain, but the tumor is the problem. And so essentially what we end up doing is putting a bunch of buyers into the funnel that are very uneducated, not very warm, and we gate everything on the way to that that information that they're looking for, simply because that's just what's been done. So Andy stopped by the podcast to kind of share him and Tourial's insights on how they ungate content and lead to a better buyer experience. So if you're a salesperson or a sales leader, this is really important to you as you continue to work on your relationship with marketing and bridging that gap and bringing warm leads into the funnel. So let's jump right in. Hey, Andy. So we were talking just a little bit before the show, getting to know one another, chopping it up. And I kind of let you in on this thing that when I started working in software really pissed me off, which was that everything is gated. And we know why we do it. We want lead capture. We want to do intent scoring and all those things. And those tools are awesome. But I'm a big advocate that a lot of times we'll create something in our sales process, whether it's in the process or pre-sales funnel, that is better for us, but we're really not thinking about the buyer or our future customer or our prospect or whatever the hell you want to call it these days, the person who is looking to possibly engage with us. And so you and the team talk a lot about ungating certain things in content and just overall building a better buyer experience. So can you talk about the friction points that you see a lot in marketing and some of the ways that you and the team at Tourial are helping people understand the best practices behind delivering a better buying experience?
Yeah, honestly, I loved what you said before the show and just now, where it's like humans have a natural tendency, obviously, to prioritize ourselves, right? And so when it comes to performance and what we're doing with marketing, with content, we're going to prioritize ourselves and the sales process. And that is directly reflected in gates, right? Because it helps our lead scores, it helps our process, it helps, it helps drive leads. It is so much more beneficial for us to be able to gate content and track everything, even though, deep down, every single person knows that they don't actually want to gate it, right? It's just, it's for themselves, but nobody wants to have to fill out a form, right? And with marketing, I think you're seeing a big transition towards more transparency or empathy in marketing, in sales, and honestly, everything, especially in tech and SaaS. You're seeing a lot more empathetic marketing where people are really forcing us to rethink our process, our ops, right? Our actual overall go-to-market strategy, and being more buyer-centric, being more buyer-led. Because if you really just, take a little bit of time, whether it's a few minutes or a few hours, and put yourself in any buyer's shoes. Doesn't have to be your buyer, it could be any buyer's shoes, and think, is this the exact way that I would want to go through a sales process, through a marketing process, through a funnel, from discovery to website to demo request to scheduling the meeting to having the demo to every single touch point, to every single friction point that takes place. Are you actually doing everything you possibly can to make it as easy as possible for them to take the next step? Or are you introducing tons of little friction points that eventually just add up to the point where somebody gets very fatigued, right? Gated content is one thing, but there are gates everywhere throughout the buyer's journey, right? Every little friction point is a tiny little gate here and there. And with gated content, you know, I think it's a lot more prevalent with the SaaS industry because we're kind of in a LinkedIn echo chamber, but I think it's very much persistent across the entire board where we just get this perception that we always need to gate things, and I just don't think that's the case. And there's lots of things that we can do, I think, to improve upon that, and a lot of it is honestly just a very, not necessarily outdated, but it's so ingrained in our process, right? To introduce these friction points, to introduce these touch points, because it helps us track things, right? It helps us track different points along the journey. But I think honestly, uh, kind of taking this, whenever I think about, okay, well, let's say that we are open to making these changes, right? We all agree that if we want to be empathetic towards the buyers and we want to remove these friction points in the buyer's journey, then let's do it, right? So many people are on board with like, let's do it. But the truth is, I don't know if you have read or are reading The Jolt Effect, but it's kind of this, it's the hottest book I feel like in SaaS and tech right now, all about this concept of the fear of messing up, right? And I think there's this idea now where if uh, if you do want to even instill some form of ungated or removing friction points in the buyer's journey, each little thing that you do requires effort, and it requires being a pretty big advocate for actually taking that, instilling that change. And if I'm going to my boss or somebody and I say, I actually think that we should ungate all of our content, or we should introduce, we should remove this friction point in the buyer's journey and this friction point in the buyer's journey, or whatever the case may be. If I'm wrong, it looks really bad for me, right? I look really bad if I'm wrong. So people get this fear of messing up, right? It's kind of this new thing that this new psychology that the book really talks about. I think it does a tremendous job of really, why is it that we aren't making decisions? And I know it's kind of, it's tangibly related to the concept of gating content, but more so around the idea of like, why aren't we seeing more of it? Why aren't we seeing people actually move forward with this very obvious, in my opinion, strategy or tactic, whichever you prefer, of removing all those friction points? And I think it's just because change is very hard. It was just something that me and Megan, my VP of Success, talked about on our recent podcast. Was just around this concept of like, yeah, it's very obvious that we want to remove these friction points and remove these little gates throughout the buyer's journey. But it's really hard to do, because if I take a stance and I'm a big advocate for it and I'm wrong, then it makes me look bad. Then I look bad, and might lose my job. I don't know. Like, especially in this day and age, people are very paranoid about that type of stuff. So the fear of messing up, I think, is a real cause for why we still see so much of this gated content, but just gates throughout the entire buyer's journey today.
Yeah, and you're so right about that. And to set some context, when I was at Jelly Smack, I evaluated probably 30 to 40 different softwares as I was building out the SDR team. And I'll take it to my grave that it was a pretty eye-opening experience. Actually helped build a lot of the foundation of what I wanted to do with Sales Doctor, was just watching, basically doing sales audits. That's what I was doing in some form or fashion. I was just seeing how these sales companies, were pivoting, the sales orgs were pivoting their products and running their process. But I've always been a firm believer that if you really want to bring better educated buyers into your funnel, who speak the same language as you, they're warmer, they understand a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what they're looking at, then you need to have more information and education readily available to them. It could be as simple as pricing. It could be as much as an inside look at the product. But I'm curious to ask and hear from you, is that maybe because of competitive intelligence, with the rise of competitive intelligence, that people don't want to engage as much of that information and they hold a lot more of that information closer to the chest? How much does that play into it? And what's a piece of advice you would give to a go-to-market leader who's thinking about revamping the way that they look at these buyer friction points?
Yeah. I have, I can honestly say that I've never experienced so much competitive paranoia until I got into SaaS, 5, 6 years ago. It's, and I get it, right? Everyone is very concerned about, I don't want the competitors to see our product and how it's built and the secret sauce that makes it what it is. And, I get that, right? Like everyone's got that kind of innate feeling. But truth is, you're actually almost never going to hear that from a marketer and you're almost never going to hear that from a salesperson. 99 times out of 100 that I've heard that, it's always been top down, right? It's always been the CEO or the board that wants to instill that sort of philosophy around preventing the competition from actually seeing the product. But like the truth is it's almost impossible to do, and it honestly kind of baffles me that today we think that we can just add a gate on top of something and that's going to keep the competition from really seeing it, right? I can't tell you. I've got burner emails, I've got burner Gmails, but I've got burner emails on actual business domains that I can just use anytime I don't want to put in my real email, right? So like it's so easy to bypass forms these days. It's if something's actually worth checking out, I actually think it creates a more of a psychological effect where, if you're talking about the competition, makes them want to get it more, makes them want to find it more, right? So, I mean, again, I get where it's coming from. I really don't think that is actually. I really don't think it matters, right? You're prioritizing competitors over your prospects and your customers is never a good thing, right? You talk about product led and sales led and all the different types of leads you can be, and they're all good things. But actually, there's kind of a negative side to that where if you're competitor led, right? Like, there's a lot of companies out there that I see that are honestly very competitor led, and they let it get to them, and they let it drive so many of their decisions that they make, that they're not making decisions for the customers, they're not making decisions for the buyers, they're not making decisions for what actually makes sense for their business. And again, if you just take that time to really think, does this actually make sense for the buyers? And if the answer is no, then I think you should really readdress how you approach it. And you mentioned something else earlier where, getting more educated people into the funnel. Totally agree. Like, couldn't agree more. It's one of the most important things. If everyone's doing all the research they possibly can before they go to your website, when they go there, they're consuming as much as they can, right? So having them be as educated as possible is a good thing. I would also argue, on the flip side, it's very important to keep uneducated buyers out of your funnel, right? And being able to expose all of your content and not necessarily your secret sauce, but like being able to show what your product does, how it works, and being able to unlock a lot of that product content, allows people to DQ themselves. Now, again, that creates a little bit of fear with marketers where it's like, well, what if they come to the website and they are qualified, but they go through the product and they don't see something they like and then they leave? I mean, that could happen, sure, but like, if it does, then it does, right? But like that's the case with anything. That's always going to be the case with anything. I think it's so important, especially with companies that have a lot of inbound or they're having a lot of DQ calls, where being able to present them with interactive demos, product content, anything at all before they actually talk to sales or jump on the demo, allows them to also DQ themselves, right? And it keeps uneducated buyers out of your funnel and allows the sales folks to spend time on leads and prospects that are important. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you said that, because I think it also probably depends on where you're at in terms of growth stage. Like, if you're just in a position where you're like, hey, we're growing, we want to talk to everybody and anybody with a pulse that's relative to our TAM,
yeah, yeah,
maybe that makes sense to give a little bit more away, but not as much as someone who's like me. Like, I kind of have a scarcity mindset right now because I'm doing it all on my own at the Sales Doctor. I have some people that help
yeah,
with contract work and content and things like that, but
yeah.
I don't want to talk to someone about producing content and sales media unless they're willing to give
Mhm.
me a $500 deposit for my time that could apply to future
Yeah,
work. And I'm okay with that, because that means they're not
yeah,
serious about either creating the content or even serious about working with me if they can't fork over 250 to $500, depending on what level of service they're interested in potentially doing. And they already know my
Yeah.
levels of service because they can go to my website, they can look at my TikTok, then go to my LinkedIn, and they're like, okay, I can see the kind of level of content we can get by working with this guy. And I'm okay with that. Now, if I had, 150 employees and all this, and I was doing other things, then maybe I toned back a little bit of stuff. But I love how you said that, like, people get scared about that in marketing because it might hurt their MQL numbers or it might affect something else. But even more importantly, I think to counter that as well, it could also help because look at our SQL conversion rates. Look at the amount of increased pipeline that we're bringing in. Look at the higher ACV from these marketing driven leads because we've let a little bit more of that information go out online and we're speaking a little bit more to the people that are interacting with us and seeing things on us from us daily. Let's jump into, I want to talk a little
Yeah.
bit about how this all circles back into what you do at Tourial. So tell everybody a little bit about what Tourial is, what it does, and then kind of how you're helping eliminate these friction points and delivering that better buying experience. Because I think what you all have is really cool and something I wish more companies used, especially as someone who evaluates software, because I'm like,
Yeah.
I go to YouTube and I like, let me see the tool. Like I'll type in the tool and I'll be like when I was shopping for sales engagement platforms, I was like, Mixmax tutorial, Groove
Oh
tutorial,
yeah.
Outreach
Yeah.
tutorial. I mean, I'd used Outreach, but I want to
Yeah.
see the tool in action and if it applies to what I know in terms of sales
Yeah.
engagement. So tell everybody
Yeah.
about Tourial, what it is you do, and a little bit about how you're helping that deliver a better buyer experience.
Yeah, I mean, you honestly pretty much described the value prop right then and there with what you were searching for in YouTube. So Tourial, we're an interactive demo platform, and we help buyers understand how your product works and what it does on their own without having to talk to a sales rep, right? So you can use it for so many different use cases and so across your entire go-to-market, especially on your website, right, where everyone goes right now to do a lot of research and try to explore your product, especially for sales-led organizations with really complex, robust products where, getting on a demo is necessary, but it requires so much effort from the buyer or the prospect to take that leap. Being able to show some or a lot of your product in some capacity to just give people a sense and an understanding of how it works, what it does is so important, right? Marketers focus so much on the what and the why, the why being very much probably one sentence, whatever your headline is on your website is usually your why, and the what being the individual features that you list on your product page. But there's this huge gap, there's this huge void that's not being filled, and that's the how, right? There's this sense of trust that no one really has when you say, okay, well, here's your why. It's kind of fluffy. It makes sense. It does align with what I'm looking for. And then you tell me you've got all these things. That's great. But like, I need to understand how it works. I need to really I want to visualize and see it and touch it because that'll allow me to build that confidence. And for me to understand how your product works is going to allow me to then want to take that demo with you, right? Because buyers these days are they're so freaking educated, or at least they think they are, in terms of how much research they're doing beforehand. So why stop them, right? Like, would you rather them go somewhere else to a third party site in which you have less control over what you say and what you're conveying, or go to a community where you have even less control over what you say versus if they're on your website, like keep them on your website, let them binge your product as much as possible, show them a true controlled story or version of your product. And then, at that point, they're going to want to take action. So that's what we do at Tourial.
I love it. Andy, as we close out the episode, any parting words that you would give to all the listeners, the sales leaders, the marketing leaders, the go-to-market professionals listening in terms of how they can deliver a better buying experience?
Oh man, well, I mean, when it comes to gating content, obviously one thing that I've always thought of is your website is the biggest gate of all, right? In terms of getting access to the product, but I think map out your buyer's journey as much as you can. Assign a value to each individual friction point and little gate along the way. You don't have to solve everything at once, but find the big friction points and solve them right away. Maybe it's gated content, maybe it's not. Maybe you are doing gated content and there's just a better way to do it, right? It just there's so much throughout the buyer's journey, your sales process, where if you truly actually just whiteboarded it and visualized it and then looked at each individual step, you don't have to look at all the data right away, because it's gonna be very obvious when you map all that stuff out and just say, okay, well, this is a clear friction point, this is a clear friction point, and this is a clear friction point. Out of these 50, like, these are the three that we really need to focus on, as opposed to solving everything all at once. That's what I would definitely recommend in terms of just trying to solve the buyer's journeys. You don't have to map out. You don't have to use that Gartner, even though they've mapped it out so well, that crazy complex buyer's journey. Like, everyone's buyer's journey is a little unique, right? So just map out the really big friction points and decide which ones do you want to solve for first. And, that's the low hanging fruit that we're all looking for. And I think you'll start to see some success almost immediately from that.
I love it. Well, Andy, thank you for the time today. If people want to engage with you or Tourial any further, where can they do that? What's the best place to connect?
Oh, I would say LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time, is on LinkedIn. So, Andy Binkley, if you wanted to find me there and connect with me, that would be great. I try to stay pretty active on there.
I love it. And we'll throw all that information in the show description below, with links to Andy's profile as well as their website for Tourial if you're interested in viewing their product. As always, thank you to everybody for listening. Don't forget to check out in the show description links to the Sales RX podcast. Additional resources that we have are free, downloadable resources on our website, as well as connecting with me and the Sales Doctor on LinkedIn. You know the drill. Every Wednesday, we publish brand new episodes at 9 a.m. Eastern, and we will see everybody on next week's episode. Thank you so much, Andy. What's up, Sales RXers? Thank you for listening to today's episode. We really appreciate you giving us the time in your day to listen to this week's installment, and I hope you found it insightful. That said, I did make a promise at the beginning of the episode that if you stuck all the way through, we would have a special offer for you, and we do. Now, listen up. If you're anything like me, you know that social selling is critical to you and your team's success. It's not just enough to cold call and cold email anymore. You have to be doing something different to stand out from the crowd. Now, that said, we spend a lot of time here at the Sales Doctor prospecting and social selling on LinkedIn, and it's very challenging. You have to get information to and from your CRM, track LinkedIn conversations, get prospect data. Next thing you know, you're 5 tools deep and you're spending all your time in this massive cross-reference of data and information. You're stepping on people's toes on different accounts with different contacts. You're messing things up. It's a pain in the butt. That's why I've partnered with Surf. They allow you to float your CRM on top of your prospects' LinkedIn profiles with a bilateral sync of not only activity and information related to your contact, but also they help you find your contact's information directly from LinkedIn. So if I go to a company's page that I'm prospecting and I want to find their head of sales and have a conversation, I don't need to manage a bunch of different tools. I can go exactly to his or her LinkedIn profile. I can add that contact to my CRM directly from LinkedIn, and I can also find their phone number and their email using Surf. The great thing is later on, when one of my reps wants to go have a conversation with that head of sales, they can see any activity that I've had, that I'm the owner of the account, the life cycle of the lead or the contact. All the information from the CRM is back on the LinkedIn view. It allows us to sell more effectively and spend more time doing what we want to do, which is having sales conversations. So I partnered with Surf, and they're giving a heck of an offer. In the show description, you'll find a link to download a free 14-day trial of their premium version of Surf. This is a tool that companies pay upwards of $400 per year, per rep, per seat, and you get it for free for 2 weeks with 25 email finder credits. That's right. If you go to the link in the show description now and download the free 14-day premium trial of Surf, you will also be given 25 email finder credits as well. This way you can start prospecting and social selling on LinkedIn without having to navigate between multiple tools. So go in the show description, click on the link, download Surf today, let me know what you think, and we'll see you on next week's episode.